Okay, this is the second video of the two-part series on Tang poetry and the Tang Shi Bai Shou, or 300 Tang poems, which was compiled in 1763. You will need to, if you haven't watched the first video already, watch that, familiarize yourself with all of the important terms and genre terms and background information so that you can understand the poems that are in this collection. As I explained in that first video, the Tang Shi Bai Shou has three main types of poems: the gushi, yuefu, and shi. The shi, as I explained in that video, has two major subtypes: the jueju, or the cut-off, literally cut-off quatrains, and the lüshi. Okay, I'm not going to explain all those terms again. Review the first video so that you completely understand these terms before watching this video and reading this collection. And students will have with them, in front of them, the translation by, there are several, as I mentioned in the first video, there are several English translations of this collection. The one we're using today is the Witter-Beiner translation, which was published in 1920 in a book called The Jade Mountain, a Chinese anthology being 300 poems of the Tang Dynasty. Okay, so I will be reciting the entire collection, and since there are so many poems, 305 or 317, I forget the exact number, I'm going to have to read these as quickly as possible so that we can get through it. And if my reading speed is too fast, you can adjust the speed on your YouTube video and slow it down, and so that you can take it all in. I also have study questions about this work that enable you to delve more deeply into the poems and analyze them. I will post a video about those later, hopefully at some point. So in this video, I'm just going to recite the entire collection. Okay. Before I begin the recitation, let me just mention once again, as I explained in the first video, that there are 8 sections of this work, and the anthology or the collection is arranged not by poet or theme or anything else. It's arranged by poem type. So section 1 is the wuyan gushi. Section 2 are the yuefu, 10 poems here. Section 3, qiyan gushi. Qiyan means heptasyllabic, or 7 syllables, you'll remember from the first video. Section 4 is yuefu again. So there's a second section of yuefu here in section 4. These are the folk song styled poems. Section 5, the wuyan lüshi. Lüshi are the regulated verse. It's one of the subtypes of the shi. Wuyan means pentasyllabic, 5 words in each line. Section 6 is the qiyan lüshi, or the 7 syllable lined lüshi, regulated verse. The 7th section of this work are the wuyan jueju, and the 8th section are the qiyan jueju. Okay, so I shouldn't even have to explain these terms. You should know them already after listening to the first video. So again, section 1, wuyan gushi. Section 2, yuefu. Section 3, qiyan gushi. Section 4, yuefu. Section 5, wuyan lüshi. Section 6, qiyan lüshi. Section 7, wuyan jueju. And Section 8, qiyan jueju. Okay, now I shall begin the recitation. Tang Shi Bai Shou, poem number 1, is by Wang Changling. Thoughts 1. A lonely swan from the sea flies, to alight on puddles it does not deign. Nesting in the poplar of pearls, it spies and questions green birds twain. Don't you feel the thread of slings, perched on top of branches so high? Nice clothes invite pointing fingers. High climbers God's good will defy. Bird hunters will crave me in vain, for I roam the limitless sky. Okay, and that was poem number 1, and these are all the wuyan gushi, so the pentasyllabic gushi, or old style poems. And you'll remember that these are of varying lengths. Poem number 2 is also by Wang Changling. Orchid and Orange 1. Tender orchid leaves in spring, and cinnamon blossoms bright in autumn, are as self-contained as life is, which conforms them to the seasons. Yet why will you think that a forest hermit, allured by sweet winds and contented with beauty, would no more ask to be transplanted than would any other natural flower. Poem 3 is also wuyan gushi. I will say the poem type only when there is a change. So this first section is all wuyan gushi. Also by Wang Changling. Thoughts number 3. The hermit in his lone abode nurses his thoughts cleansed of care. Them he projects to the wild goose for it to his distant sovereign to bear. Who will be moved by the sincerity of my vain day and night prayer? What comfort is for my loyalty when flyers and sinkers can compare? Okay, note that the translator here is reproducing the rhyme pattern that is present in the originals. Next poem, also by Wang Changling, Orchid and Orange too. Here, south of the Yangtze, grows a red orange tree. All winter long its leaves are green, not because of a warmer soil, but because its nature is used to the cold. Though it might serve your honorable guests, you leave it here, far below mountain and river. Circumstance governs destiny. Cause and effect are an infinite cycle. You plant your peach trees and your plums. You forget the shade from this other tree. Next poem is by Li Bai. Down Zhongnang Mountain to the kind pillow and bowl of husi. Down the blue mountain in the evening, moonlight was my homeward escort. Looking back, I saw my path lie in levels of deep shadow. I was passing the farmhouse of a friend when his children called from a gate of thorn and led me twining through jade bamboos, where green vines caught and held my clothes. And I was glad of a chance to rest and glad of a chance to drink with my friend. We sang to the tune of the wind in the pines, and we finished our songs as the stars went by. When, I being drunk and my friend more than happy, between us we forgot the world. Poem 6, also by Li Bai. Drinking alone with the moon. We're still in the wuyan gushi section. Drinking alone with the moon. From a pot of wine among the flowers I drank alone. There was no one with me, till, raising my cup, I asked the bright moon to bring me my shadow and make us three. Alas, the moon was unable to drink, and my shadow tagged me vacantly. But still for a while I had these friends to cheer me through the end of spring. I sang. The moon encouraged me. I danced. My shadow tumbled after. As long as I knew, we were boon companions. And then I was drunk, and we lost one another. Should goodwill ever be secure? I watched the long road of the river of stars. Next poem, also by Li Bai. In spring. Your grasses up north are as blue as jade. Our mulberries here curve green-threaded branches, and at last you think of returning home. Now when my heart is almost broken, O breeze of the spring, since I dare not know you, why part the silk curtains by my bed? Next is poem 8 by Dufu. A view of Taishan. What shall I say of the great peak? The ancient dukedoms are everywhere green, inspired and stirred by the breath of creation, with the twin forces balancing day and night. I bare my breast toward opening clouds. I strain my sight after birds flying home. When shall I reach the top and hold all mountains in a single glance? Poem 9 by Dufu again. To my retired friend Wei. It is almost as hard for friends to meet as for the morning and evening stars. Tonight, then, is a rare event. Joining in the candlelight, two men were young not long ago, but now are turning gray at the temples. To find that half our friends are dead shocks us, burns our hearts with grief. We little guessed it would be 20 years before I could visit you again. When I went away, you were still unmarried. But now these boys and girls in a row are very kind to their father's old friend. They ask me when I have been on my journey, And then, when we have talked a while, they bring and show me wines and dishes, spring chives cut in the night rain, and brown rice cooked freshly a special way. My host proclaims it a festival. He urges me to drink 10 cups. But what 10 cups could make me as drunk as I always am with your love in my heart? Tomorrow the mountains will separate us. After tomorrow, who can say? Okay, so note that that was a rather long instance of the gushi. Next is poem 10, also by Du Fu. We're still in the wuyan gushi section. Alone in her beauty. Who is lovelier than she? Yet she lives alone in an empty valley. She tells me she came from a good family, which is humbled now in the dust. When trouble arose in the Qiyan district, her brothers and close kin were killed. What use were their high offices, not even shielding their own lives? The world has but scorn for adversity. Hope goes out like the light of a candle. Her husband, with a vagrant heart, seeks a new face like a new piece of jade. And when morning glories furl at night and mandarin ducks lie side by side, all he can see is the smile of the new love, while the old love weeps unheard. The brook was pure in its mountain source, but away from the mountain its waters darken. Waiting for her maid to come from selling pearls, for straw to cover the roof again, she picks a few flowers, no longer for her hair, and lets pine needles fall through her fingers. And forgetting her thin silk sleeve in the cold, she leans in the sunset by a tall bamboo. Okay, that was the poem Jiaren. And Ishika-jun took the word Jiaren as the title of his debut work, I should mention, which is not that important, but I'll mention it nonetheless. Alright, moving on. Poem 11, we're still in wuyan gushi. The next one is also by Du Fu. Next we have Seen Li Bai in a Dream. And again, as I mentioned in the first video, all of these poems are extremely famous and well known to all of to most Chinese people, school children, memorized by school children since the Tang period, and especially after this anthology was compiled. So even today, most Chinese have memorized at least a dozen or so of these poems. Next poem is Du Fu, Seen Li Bai in a Dream, Part 1. There are sobs when death is the cause of parting, but life has its partings again and again. From the poisonous damps of the southern river, you had sent me not one sign from your exile, till you came to me last night in a dream, because I am always thinking of you. I wondered if it were really you, venturing so long a journey. You came to me through the green of a forest. You disappeared by a shadowy fortress. Yet out of the midmost mesh of your snare, how could you lift your wings and use them? I woke, and the low moon's glimmer on a rafter seemed to be your face, still floating in the air. There were waters to cross. They were wild and tossing. If you fell, there were dragons and river monsters. Okay, next is poem 12, also by Du Fu. Part 2 of the last one. Seeing Li Bai in a Dream, Part 2. This cloud that has drifted all day through the sky may, like a wanderer, never come back. 3 nights now I've dreamed of you, as tender, intimate, and real as though I were awake. And then, abruptly rising to go, you told me the perils of adventure. By river and lake, the storms, the wrecks, the fears that are born on a little boat. And here in my doorway you rubbed your white head as if there were something puzzling you. Our capital teems with officious people, while you are alone and helpless and poor. Who says that the heavenly net never fails? It has brought you ill fortune, old as you are. 1,000 years fame, 10,000 years fame. What good when you are dead and gone? Poem 13 is by Wang Wei. At Parting. I dismount from my horse and I offer you wine. And Wang Wei, of course, is most famous for the frontier poems, right? Poems that are have the frontier and being very, very far away in the hinterlands, far away from the capital and from loved ones and so forth, as the major theme of his poem. Wang Wei, At Parting. I dismount from my horse and I offer you wine. I ask you where you are going and why. And you answer, I am discontent and would rest at the foot of the southern mountain. So give me leave and ask me no more questions. White clouds pass there without end. Poem 14, also by Wang Wei. To Qiyan, bound home after failing in an examination. In a happy reign there should be no hermits. The wise and able should consult together. So you, a man of the eastern mountains, gave up your life of picking herbs and came all the way to the gate of gold. But you found your devotion unavailing. To spend the day of no fire on one of the southern rivers, you have mended your spring clothes here in the northern cities. I pour you the farewell wine as you set out from the capital. Soon I shall be left behind here by my bosom friend. In your sailboat of sweet cinnamon wood, you will float again toward your own thatched door, led along by distant trees to a sunset shining on a faraway town. What though your purpose may happen to fail, doubt not that some of us can hear high music. Poem 15, also by Wang Wei. A green stream. I have sailed the river of yellow flowers, borne by the channel of a green stream, rounding 10,000 turns through the mountains on a journey of less than 30 miles. Rapids hum over heaped rocks, but where light grows dim in the thick pines, the surface of an inlet sways with nut horns, and weeds are lush along the banks. Down in my heart I have always been as pure as the limpid water is. Oh, to remain on a broad, flat rock and to cast a fishing line forever. Poem 16, also by Wang Wei. A farmhouse on the Wei River. In the slant of the sun on the countryside, cattle and sheep trail home along the lane, and a rugged old man in a thatched door leans on a staff and thinks of his son, the herd boy. There are whirring pheasants, full wheat ears, silkworms asleep, pared mulberry leaves, and the farmers, returning with hoes on their shoulders, hail one another familiarly. No wonder I long for the simple life, and am sighing the old song, Oh, to go back again. Poem 17, also by Wang Wei. The beautiful Shi. Since beauty is honored all over the empire, how could Shi remain humbly at home, washing clothes at dawn by a southern lake, and that evening a great lady in the palace of the north, lowly one day, no different from the others, the next day exalted, everyone praising her. No more would her own hands powder her face or arrange on her shoulders a silken robe. And the more the king loved her, the lovelier she looked, blinding him away from wisdom. Girls who had once washed silk beside her were kept at a distance from her chariot, and none of the girls in her neighbors' houses, by pursing their brows, could copy her beauty. Next poem by Meng Haorang. Keep in mind we're still in the wuyan gushi section. On climbing Orchid Mountain in the autumn to Jiang. On a northern peak among white clouds you have found your hermitage of peace. And now as I climb this mountain to see you, high with the wild geese flies my heart. The quiet dusk might seem a little sad if this autumn weather were not so brisk and clear. I look down at the riverbank with homeward bound villagers resting on the sand till the ferry returns. There are trees at the horizon like a row of grasses, and against the river's rim an island like the moon. I hope that you will come and meet me, bringing a basket of wine, and we'll celebrate together the mountain holiday. Next poem by Meng Haorang again. In summer at the South Pavilion, thinking of Xing. The mountain light suddenly fails in the west. In the east from the lake the slow moon rises. I loosen my hair to enjoy the evening coolness, and open my window and lie down in peace. The wind brings me odors of lotuses, and bamboo leaves drip with the music of dew. I would take up my lute and I would play, but alas, who here would understand? And so I think of you, old friend, O troubler of my midnight dreams. Poem 20, also by Meng Haorang. At the mountain lodge of the Buddhist priest Ye, waiting in vain for my friend Ding. Now that the sun has set beyond the western range, valley after valley is shadowy and dim, and now through pine trees come the moon and the chill of evening, and my ears feel pure with the sound of wind and water. Nearly all the woodsmen have reached home. Birds have settled on their perches in the quiet mist, and still, because you promised, I am waiting for you, waiting, playing lute under a wayside vine. Next poem by Wang Changling. With my brother at the south study, thinking in the moonlight of vice prefect Cai in Shangying. I think that might be vice perfect. We'll have to check on that. Might be a typo in your handout. Lying on a high seat in the south study, we have lifted the curtain and we see the rising moon brighten with pure light, the water and the grove, and flow like a wave on our window and our door. It will move through the cycle, full moon and then crescent again, calmly beyond our wisdom, altering new to old. Our chosen one, our friend, is now by a limpid river, singing perhaps a plaintive eastern song. He is far, far away from us, 300 miles away, and yet a breath of orchids comes along the wind. Poem 22, by Wei. After missing the recluse on the western mountain. To your hermitage here on the top of the mountain I have climbed without stopping these 10 miles. I have knocked at your door and no one answered. I have peeped into your room and at your seat beside the table. Perhaps you are out riding in your canopied chair, or fishing more likely in some autumn pool. Sorry though I am to be missing you. You have become my meditation. The beauty of your grasses fresh with rain, and close beside your window the music of your pines. I take into my being all that I see and hear, soothing my senses, quieting my heart. And though there be neither host nor guest, have I not reasoned a visit complete? After enough, I have gone down the mountain. Why should I wait for you any longer? Poem 23, by Qiyan. A boat in spring on Luya Lake. Thoughtful elation has no end. Onward I bear it to whatever come. And my boat and I, before the evening breeze, passing flowers entering the lake, turn at nightfall toward the western valley, where I watch the south star over the mountain and a mist that rises hovering soft, and the low moon slanting through the trees, and I choose to put away from me every worldly matter, and only to be an old man with a fishing pole. Poem 24, by Changjiang. At Wang Changling's retreat. Wang Changling, of course, is one of the major poets of the Tang Dynasty. He's included in this collection. Here, beside a clear, deep lake, you live accompanied by clouds, or soft through the pine the moon arrives to be your own pure-hearted friend. You rest under thatch in the shadow of your flowers. Your dewy herbs flourish in their bed of moss. Let me leave the world. Let me alight, like you, on your western mountain with phoenixes and cranes. Poem 25. We're still in the wuyan gushi section, the first section. Zeng. Ascending the pagoda at the temple of kind favor with gaoshi and jueju. The pagoda, rising abruptly from earth, reaches to the very palace of heaven. Climbing, we seem to have left the world behind us, with the steps we look down on hung from space. It overtops a holy land, and can only have been built by toil of the spirit. Its 4 sides darken the bright moon. Its 7 stories cut the gray clouds. Birds fly down beyond our sight, and the rapid wind below our hearing. Mountain ranges toward the east appear to be curving and flowing like rivers. Far green locust trees line broad roads toward clustered palaces and mansions. Colors of autumn, out of the west, enter advancing through the city. And northward there lie in five graveyards, calm forever under dewy green grass, those who know life's final meaning, which all humankind must learn. Henceforth I put my official hat aside. To find the eternal way is the only happiness. Poem 26 by Yuan. To the tax collectors after the bandits' retreat. And here's the preface to the poem. In the year Kui Mao, the bandits from Xiyuan entered Daozhou, set fire, raided, killed, and looted. The whole district was almost ruined. The next year the bandits came again and, attacking the neighboring prefecture Yong, passed this one by. It was not because they were strong enough to defend ourselves, but probably because they pitied us. And how now can these commissioners bear to impose extra taxes? I have written this poem for the collector's information. That's the preface to the poem. Here's the poem. I still remember those days of peace. 20 years among mountains and forests, the pure stream running past my yard, the caves and valleys at my door. Taxes were light and regular then, and I could sleep soundly and late in the morning, till suddenly came a sorry change. For years now I have been serving in the army. When I began here as an official, the mountain bandits were rising again. But the town was so small it was spared by the thieves, and the people so poor and so pitiable that all other districts were looted, and this one this time let alone. Do you imperial commissioners mean to be less kind than bandits? The people you force to pay the toll are like creatures frying over a fire. And how can you sacrifice human lives just to be known as able collectors? Oh, let me fling down my official seal, let me be a lone fisherman in a small boat, and support my family on fish and wheat, and content my old age with rivers and lakes. Okay, that was a fairly long example of the gushi. Okay, we're still in the wuyan gushi section. Here's poem 27 now by Wei Wu. Entertaining literary men in my official residence on a rainy day. Literary men is Wang Shi in the original. Note that bunshi in Japanese. Here's the poem by Wei Wu. Outside are insignia, shown in state, but here are sweet incense clouds quietly ours. Wind and rain coming in from sea have cooled this pavilion above the lake and driven the feverish heat away from where my eminent guests are gathered. Ashamed though I am of my high position, while people lead unhappy lives, let us reasonably banish care and just be friends, enjoying nature. Though we have to go without fish and meat, there are fruits and vegetables aplenty. We bow, we take our cups of wine, we give our attention to beautiful poems. When the mind is exalted, the body is lightened, and feels as if it could float in the wind. Suzhou is famed as a center of letters, and all you writers coming here prove that the name of a great land is made by better things than wealth, namely one, or literature, patterns, words, language. Poem 28, still in wuyan gushi. This is also by Wei Wu. Setting sail on the Yangtze to Secretary Yuan. Wistful, away from my friends and kin, through mist and fog I float and float, with the sail that bears me toward Luoyang. In Yangzhou, trees linger bell notes of evening, marking the day and the place of our parting. When shall we meet again and where? Destiny is a boat on the waves, borne to and fro beyond our will. Poem 29, also wuyan gushi. We're still in wuyan gushi section. This is also by Wei Wu, a poem to a Taoist hermit, Chuangjiao Mountain. My office has grown cold today, and I suddenly think of my mountain friend gathering firewood down in the valley, or boiling white stones for potatoes in his hut. I wish I might take him a cup of wine to cheer him through the evening storm, but in fallen leaves that have heaped the bare slopes, how should I ever find his footprints? Okay, that was a poem about a Taoist mountain, Taoist theme, Taoist sage or person, hermit. Keep in mind that, as I mentioned in the first video, there are many poems in this collection with Confucian themes. There are many poems in this collection with Taoist themes. There are, however, very few that have Buddhist, explicitly Buddhist themes. Remember that as we read it. Poem number 30. We're still in wuyan gushi section. This is also by Wei Wu, on meeting my friend Feng Ju in the capital. Out of the east you visit me with the rain of Baling still on your clothes. I ask you what you have come here for. You say, to buy an axe for cutting wood in the mountains. Hidden deep in a haze of blossom, swallow fledglings chirp at ease, as they did when we parted a year ago. How gray our temples have grown since then. Poem 31, also by Wei Wu. Mooring at twilight in Yuyi district. Furling my sail near the town of Huai, I find for harbor a little cove where a sudden breeze whips up the waves. The sun is growing dim now and sinks in the dust. People are coming home. The bright mountain peak darkens. Wild geese fly down to an island of white weeds. At midnight I think of a northern city gate, and I hear a bell tolling between me and sleep. Poem 32, also by Wei Wu, east of the town. From office confinement all year long, I have come out of town to be free this morning, where willows harmonize the wind, and green hills lighten the cares of the world. I lean by a tree and rest myself, or wander up and down a stream. Mists have wet the fragrant meadows. A spring dove calls from some hidden place. With quiet surroundings the mind is at peace, but beset with affairs it grows restless again. Here I shall finally build me a cabin, as Tao Qian built one long ago. Okay, so as I mentioned in the first video, this is one of the poems that are about the frustrations of working in the bureaucracy. In this poem, the poet persona, leaves the world of the bureaucracy and goes to find freedom at this cabin, right? Poem 33, we're still in wuyan gushi section, also by Wei Wu, to my daughter on her marriage into the Yang family. My heart has been heavy all day long because you have so far to go. The marriage of a girl away from her parents is the launching of a little boat on a great river. You were very young when your mother died, which made me the more tender of you. Your elder sister has looked out for you, and now you are both crying and cannot part. This makes my grief the harder to bear. Yet it is right that you should go. Having had from childhood no mother to guide you, how will you honor your mother-in-law? It's an excellent family. They will be kind to you. They will forgive you your mistakes. Although ours has been so pure and poor that you can take them no dowry, be gentle and respectful as a woman should be. So Confucian didactic message inserted into this poem. Careful of word and look, observant of good example. After this morning we separate. There's no knowing for how long. I always try to hide my feelings. They are suddenly too much for me. When I turn and see my younger daughter with the tears running down her cheek. So the major theme in that poem is separation, which is one of the main themes of this collection. Poem 34 by Liu Yuan. Liu Yuan, reading Buddhist classics with Zhao at his temple in the early morning. And again, notice how many of these rather long gushi are very narrative in their content, right? They tell a story, they set a scene, they have characters that are semi-developed, and this is something that we will not see in the later shorter verse form of the jueju, which is the short quatrain, which is similar to the Japanese haiku. It's often compared to that. These are, in this section we have the longer narrative poems. Reading Buddhist classics with Zhao at his temple in the early morning. I clean my teeth in water drawn from a cold well. And while I brush my clothes, I purify my mind. Then, slowly turning pages in the tree leaf book, I recite along the path to the eastern shelter. The world has forgotten the true fountain of this teaching, and people enslave themselves to miracles and fables. Under the given words, I want the essential meaning. I look for the simplest way to sow and reap my nature. Here in the quiet of the priest's temple courtyard, mosses add their climbing color to the thick bamboo, and now comes the sun out of mist and fog, and pines that seem to be new-bathed. And everything is gone from me. Speech goes, and reading, leaving the single unison. Poem 35. We're still in wuyan gushi section. Poem 35 is also by Liu Yuan. Dwelling by a stream. I had so long been troubled by official hat and robe that I am glad to be in exile here in this wild Southland. I am a neighbor now of planters and reapers. I am a guest of the mountains and woods. I plow in the morning, turning dewy grasses, and at evening tie my fisher boat, breaking the quiet stream. Back and forth I go, scarcely missing anyone, and sing a long poem and gaze at the blue sky. So again, about the frustrations of the bureaucracy, leaving the bureaucracy and going to gaze at the blue sky in the wilderness by oneself. Poem 36. Now we enter the yuefu section, the first yuefu section. There are two yuefu sections. This is the first one. Poem 36 is by Wang Changling, At a Border Fortress. So again, Wang Changling is the poet who is best known for his frontier poems. This is one of them. At a Border Fortress. Cicadas complain of thin mulberry trees. In the 8th month, chill at the frontier pass. Through the gate and back again, all along the road, there is nothing anywhere but yellow reeds and grasses, and the bones of soldiers from Yo and from Bing, who have buried their lives in the dusty sand. Let never a cavalier stir you to envy with boasts of his horse and his horsemanship. Okay, note again at the yuefu, Music Bureau folk songs like ballads or poems are of various lengths. The next one is much shorter than the one we just read. Poem 37, again by Wang Changling, again a frontier poem. Under a border fortress, drink my horse while we cross the autumn water. The stream is cold and the wind like a sword. As we watch against the sunset on the sandy plain, far, far away, shadowy Lingcao, old battles waged by those long walls once were proud on all men's tongues. But antiquity now is a yellow dust, confusing in the grasses its ruins and white bones. Poem 38, yuefu. We're going to be in the yuefu section for a while, so I don't need to say it each time we read it. Poem 38 is by Li Bai, The Moon at the Fortified Pass. So again, a frontier poem. So a lot of these yuefu are frontier poems. Here we're at the Fortified Pass. Li Bai. The bright moon lifts from the mountain of heaven in an infinite haze of cloud and sea, and the wind that has come 1,000 miles beats at the jade pass battlements. China marches its men down Baideng Road, while Tartar troops peer across blue waters of the bay. And since not one battle famous in history sent all its fighters back again, the soldiers turn round, looking toward the border, and think of home with wistful eyes, and of those tonight in the upper chambers who toss and sigh and cannot rest. Poem 39 is also by Li Bai. It's another short yuefu, Ballads of Four Seasons, Spring. The lovely Lofo of the western land plucks mulberry leaves by the waterside. Across the green boughs stretched out her white hand. In golden sunshine her rosy robe is dyed. My silkworms are hungry, I cannot stay. Tarry not with your 5-horse cab, I pray. So kind of sing-song-like quality at the end of that yuefu, short yuefu by Li Bai. The next poem, poem number 40, is also a short yuefu by Li Bai. Ballads of Four Seasons. Now we have the summer one of this series. On Mirror Lake outspread for miles and miles, the lotus lilies in full blossom teem. In fifth moon Shi Shi, so the beauty who was mentioned above in one of the other poems, in fifth month Shi Shi gathers them with smiles. Watchers overwhelm the bank of Yueya stream. Her boat turns back without waiting moonrise to Yoyao house amid amorous sighs. So a little erotic element in that one. Next is poem 41, also another short yuefu by Li Bai. A Song of an Autumn Midnight. A slip of the moon hangs over the capital. 10,000 washing mallets are pounding. And the autumn wind is blowing my heart forever and ever toward the Jade Pass. Oh, when will the Tartar troops be conquered, and my husband come back from the long campaign? So as I mentioned in the video 1, a lot of the yuefu are written from a fictional persona, a fictional perspective. Here we have a woman who misses her husband serving as the narrator. Li Bai obviously is not a woman, but he's writing from the perspective of a woman in this yuefu. And note that a lot of the yuefu, although it's not, the rule about this is not rigid, a lot of the yuefu that we've read so far in this section are pentasyllabic, or wuyan, right? They have 5 Chinese characters per line. Okay, but not always. Okay. Next is poem number 42, another yuefu by Li Bai. Again, here it's also pentasyllabic, or wuyan, with 6 lines total. Ballad of Four Seasons, the winter now. This is the winter section of this series. The courier will depart next day, she's told. She sews a warrior's gown all night. Her fingers felt the needle cold. How can she hold the scissors tight? The work is done, she sends it far away. When will it reach the town where warriors stay? So there's a rhyme there at the end, in the original and in the English translation, giving it a sort of sing-songy quality. Poem number 43 now, also yuefu by Li Bai. This is a longer one. It's still wuyang, or pentasyllabic, but it's much longer in its number of lines. Folk songs, lyric verse by Li Bai. The title is A Song of Changgan. My hair had hardly covered my forehead. Changgan. Changgan, yes. Changgan, not Chang'an, the capital. Changgan. That is not a typo there. A Song of Changgan. My hair had hardly covered my forehead. I was picking flowers, paying by my door. When you, my lover, on a bamboo horse, came trotting in circles and throwing green plums. We lived near together on a lane in Changkang, both of you young and happy-hearted. At 14, I became your wife. I just realized what this is. This is the famous poem that Ezra Pounds did his translation of. So Ezra Pounds' famous translation, the most famous of his Chinese translation, is this one. We'll read that maybe later and compare it with this translation that we have here. Poem 43, it's a yuefu by Li Bai. Let me read it again from the beginning, knowing that it is now that famous poem that Ezra Pound did. A Song of Changgan. My hair had hardly covered my forehead. So this is from the perspective of a girl who has just recently been married. She's recounting the events of her recent life, the recent years, or decade or so. My hair had hardly covered my forehead. I was picking flowers, paying by my door, when you, my lover, on a bamboo horse, came trotting in circles and throwing green plums. We lived near together on a lane in Changgan, both of us young and happy-hearted. At 14 I became your wife, so bashful that I dared not smile. And I lowered my head toward a dank corner, and would not turn to your 1,000 calls. But at 15 I straightened my brows and laughed, learning that no dust could ever seal our love, that even unto death I would await you by my post, and would never lose heart in the tower of silent watching. Then when I was 16, you left on a long journey through the gorges of Chutang, of rock and whirling water, and then came the 5th month, more than I could bear, and I tried to hear the monkeys in your lofty far-off sky. Your footprints by our door, where I had watched you go, were hidden, every one of them, under green moss, hidden under moss too deep to sweep away. And the first autumn wind added fallen leaves, and now in the 8th month yellowing butterflies hover 2 by 2 in our west garden grasses, and because of all of this my heart is breaking, and I fear for my bright cheeks lest they fade. Oh, at last, when you return through the 3 districts, send me a message home ahead, and I will come and meet you and will never mind the distance, all the way to Changfeng Sha. Poem 44, also yuefu. This is by Meng Jiao. A song of a pure-hearted girl. So again from the perspective of a young woman. Girl. Laka trees ripen 2 by 2, and mandarin ducks die side by side. If a true-hearted girl will love only her husband, in a life as faithfully lived as theirs, what troubling wave can arrive to vex a spirit like water in a timeless well? So this is much shorter than the previous few yuefu that we have just read. This one is also wuyan, or pentasyllabic, but it is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines in total. Okay, next poem is 45, still in yuefu section. This is also by Meng Jiao, a traveler's song, a short yuefu. The thread in the hands of a fond-hearted mother makes clothes for the body of her wayward boy. Carefully she sews and thoroughly she mends, dreading the delays that will keep him late from home. But how much love has the inch-long grass for 3 spring months of the light of the sun? Poem 46 is now we're finished with the first yuefu section. Now we are in the qiyan gushi section. Okay, so qiyan is heptasyllabic, or poems with 7 Chinese characters per line. Even though it doesn't look like they're... Even though it looks like there are only 5 here, I'll have to check on this. But I think we're in the qiyan gushi section here. 7 character ancient verse by Cheng Jiang. On a gate tower at Yuzhou, where before me are the ages that have gone, and where behind me are the coming generations. I think of heaven and earth without limit, without end, and I am all alone, and my tears fall down. Okay, that was a very short qiyan gushi. Okay, continuing, poem 47 is also qiyan gushi, or heptasyllabic old-style verse. File just stopped for some reason. Qiyan gushi, poem 47 by Li Bai, an old air. Gushi, keep in mind that these are of various lengths. This one is not too long, it's a medium-sized poem. Medium-length poem. There once was a man sent on military missions, a wanderer from youth on the You and Yan frontiers. Under the horse's hoofs he would meet his foes, and recklessly risking his 7-foot body, would slay whoever dared confront those mustaches that bristled like porcupine quills. There were dark clouds below the hills. There were white clouds above them. But before a man has served full time, how can he go back? In eastern Liao, a girl was waiting, a girl of 15 years, deft with a guitar, expert in dance and song. She seems to be fluting, even now, a reed song of home, filling every soldier's eyes with homesick tears. Poem 48. We're still in qiyan gushi section. This next one is of medium length. It is by Li Bai again. A farewell to my friend Cheng Jiangfu. In the 4th month, the south wind blows plains of yellow barley. Date flowers have not faded yet, and laka leaves are long. The green peak that we left at dawn, we still can see at evening, while our horses whinny on the road, eager to turn homeward. Chen, my friend, you have always been a great and good man, with your dragon's mustache, tiger's eyebrow, and your massive forehead. In your bosom you have shelved away 10,000 volumes. You have held your head high, never bowed it in the dust. After buying us wine and pledging us here at the eastern gate, and taking things as lightly as a wild goose feather, flat you lie, tipsy, forgetting the white sun. But now and then you open your eyes and gaze at the high lone cloud. The tide head of the lone river joins the darkening sky. The ferryman beaches his boat. It has grown too late to sail, and people on their way from Cheng cannot go home, and people from Luoyang sigh with disappointment. I have heard about the many friends around your woodland dwelling. Yesterday you were dismissed. Are they your friends today? Poem 49. We're still in the qiyan gushi section, also by Li Bai, a lute song. This is a fairly short one. Our host, providing abundant wine to make the night mellow, asks his guest from Yangzhou to play for us on the lute. Toward the moon that whitens the city wall, black crows are flying. Frost is on 10,000 trees, and the wind blows through our clothes. But a copper stove has added its light to that of flowery candles, and the lute plays the green water, and then the Queen of Chu. Once it has begun to play, there is no other sound. A spell is on the banquet, while the stars grow thin. But 300 miles from here in Huai, an official duties await him. And so it's farewell, and the road again, under cloudy mountains. Poem 50. Also by Li Bai. On hearing Dong play the flageolet, a poem to palace attendant Fang. When this melody for the flageolet was made by Lady Tsai, when long ago, one by one, she sang its 18 stanzas, even the Tartars were shedding tears into the border grasses, and the envoy of China was heartbroken, turning back home with his escort. Cold fires now of old battles are gray on ancient forts, and the wilderness is shadowed with white, new-flying snow. When the player first brushes the shang string and the jue, and then the yu, autumn leaves in all 4 quarters are shaken with a murmur. Dong, the master, must have been taught in heaven. Demons come from the deep pine wood and stealthily listen to music slow, then quick, following his hand, now far away, now near again, according to his heart. 100 birds from an empty mountain scatter and return. 3,000 miles of floating clouds darken and lighten. A wild goose fledgling left behind cries for its flock, and a Tartar child for the mother he loves. Then river waves are calmed and birds are mute that were singing, and Wuzi tribes are homesick for their distant land. And out of the dust of Siberian steppes rises a plaintive sorrow. Suddenly the low sound leaps to a freer tune. Like a long wind swaying a forest, a downpour breaking tiles, a cascade through the air, flying over treetops, a wild deer calls to his fellows. He is running among the mansions in the corner of the capital by the eastern palace wall. Phoenix Lake lies opposite the gate of green jade. But how can fame and profit concern a man of genius? Day and night I long for him to bring his lute again. Continuing poem 51, we are still in the qiyan gushi section. The next poem is also by Li Bai. On hearing An Wan Shan play the reed pipe. Bamboo from the southern hills was used to make this pipe, and its music that was introduced from Persia first of all has taken on new magic through later use in China. And now the Tartar from Liangzhou, blowing it for me, drawing a sigh from whosoever hears it, is bringing to a wanderer's eyes homesick tears. Many like to listen, but few understand. To and fro at will there's a long wind flying, dry mulberry trees, old cypresses trembling in its chill. There are 9 baby phoenixes outcrying one another. A dragon and a tiger spring up at the same moment. Then in 100 waterfalls, 10,000 songs of autumn are suddenly changing the yang lament. And when yellow clouds grow thin and the white sun darkens, they are changing still again to spring in the willow trees. Like imperial garden flowers, brightening the eye with beauty, are the high hall candles we have lighted this cold night, and with every cup of wine goes another round of music. Poem 52, this is a relatively short qiyan gushi by Meng Haorang, whose several poems we have already read. Returning at night to Lumen Mountain. A bell in the mountain temple sounds the coming of night. I hear people at the fishing town stumble aboard the ferry, while others follow the sand bank to their homes along the river. I also take a boat and am bound for Lumen Mountain, and soon the Lumen moonlight is piercing misty trees. I have come, before I know it, upon an ancient hermitage, the thatched door, the piney path, the solitude, the quiet, where a hermit lives and moves, never needing a companion. Poem 53, we're still in qiyan gushi section, and the next one is by Li Bai. This is a fairly middle-length gushi. A song of Lu Mountain to censor Lu Shu Zhou. I am the madman of the Chu country, who sang a mad song disputing Confucius. So immediately he's taking the persona. So we see a persona not only in the yuefu, but in the gushi as well. Keep that in mind. It's an important point. Holding in my hand a staff of green jade, I have crossed, since morning at the Yellow Crane Terrace, all 5 holy mountains, without a thought of distance, according to the one constant habit of my life. Lu Mountain stands beside the southern dipper, in clouds reaching silken like a 9-paneled screen, with its shadows in a crystal lake deepening the green water. The Golden Gate opens into 2 mountain ranges. A silver stream is hanging down to 3 stone bridges within sight of the mighty Tripod Falls. Ledges of cliff and winding trails lead to blue sky and a flush of cloud in the morning sun, whence no flight of birds could be blown into Wu. I climb to the top. I survey the whole world. I see the long river that runs beyond return. yellow clouds that winds have driven hundreds of miles, and a snow peak whitely circled by the swirl of a ninefold stream. And so I am singing a song of Lu Mountain, a song that is born of the breath of Lu Mountain, where the stone mirror makes the heart's purity purer, and green moss has buried the footsteps of Xie. I have eaten the immortal pellet, and rid of the world's troubles, before the lute's third playing, have achieved my element. Far away I watch the angels riding colored clouds toward heaven's jade city, with hibiscus in their hands. And so, when I have traversed the 9 sections of the world, I will follow Saint Luo up the great purity. Poem 54. We're still in the qiyan gushi section. This one is also by Li Bai, and it's another fairly long one. Tianmu Mountain Ascended in a Dream is the title. A seafaring visitor will talk about Japan, which waters and mists conceal beyond approach. But Yue people talk about Heavenly Mother Mountain, still seen through its varying deeps of cloud. And you will note that the kanji, the Hanza used for Japan here is a term that we're not familiar with, so we'll have to look at the origins and the meanings of and the associations of that term later. Continuing. In a straight line to heaven, its summit enters heaven, tops the 5 holy peaks, and casts a shadow through China with the 100-mile length of the heavenly terrace range, which, just at this point, begins turning southeast. My heart and my dreams are in Wu and Yue, and they cross Mirror Lake all night in the moon. And the moon lights my shadow and me to Yan River, with the hermitage of Xie still there, and the monkeys calling clearly over ripples of green water. I wear his pegged boots up a ladder of blue cloud, sunny ocean halfway, holy cockcrow in space, myriad peaks and more valleys and nowhere a road. Flowers lure me, rocks ease me, day suddenly ends. Bears, dragons, tempestuous on mountain and river, startle the forest and make the heights tremble. Clouds darken with darkness of rain, streams pale with pallor of mist. The gods of thunder and lightning shatter the whole range. The stone gate breaks asunder, venting in the pit of heaven an impenetrable shadow. But now the sun and moon illumine a gold and silver terrace, and clad in rainbow garments, riding on the wind, come the queens of all the clouds, descending one by one, with tigers for their lute players and phoenixes for dancers. Row upon row, like fields of hemp, range the fairy figures. I move, my soul goes flying, I wake with a long sigh, my pillow and my matting are the lost clouds I was in. And this is the way it always is with human joy. 10,000 things run forever like water toward the east. And so I take my leave of you, not knowing for how long. But let me on my green slope raise a white deer and ride to you, great mountain, when I have need of you. Oh, how can I gravely bow and scrape to men of high rank and men of high office who never will suffer being shown an honest-hearted face. Okay, so in the video 1, first video of the series, I explained how one of the major themes of these poems in this collection is transcendent wandering, or shouyo in Japanese, xiaoyao, or something like that in the Chinese, forget the pronunciation, but it's sort of notion of Taoist escape, leaving the worldly concerns, and embarking on a kind of transcendent wandering. And this poem that I just read here is very much a transcendent wandering themed poem. Moving on, we're still in qiyan gushi section. Here is poem 55 by Li Bai, Parting at a Wine Shop in Nanjing. A wind bringing willow cotton sweetens the shop, and a girl from Wu, pouring wine, urges me to share it with my comrades of the city who are here to see me off. And as each of them drains his cup, I say to him in parting, "Oh, go and ask this river running to the east if it can travel farther than a friend's love." Poem 56, also by Li Bai. We're still in Qiyan gushi section. This is another medium length poem. A farewell, medium length gushi, heptasyllabic gushi. A farewell to Secretary Xu Yong at the Xietiao Villa in Xuanzhou. Since yesterday had to throw me in bolt, today has hurt my heart even more. The autumn wild geese have a long wind for escort as I face them from this villa, drinking my wine. The bones of the great writers are your brushes in the school of heaven, and I am a lesser xie growing up by your side. We both are exalted to distant thought, aspiring to the sky and the bright moon. But since water still flows, though we cut it with our swords, and sorrows return, though we drown them with wine, since the world can in no way answer our craving, I will loosen my hair tomorrow and take to a fishing boat. Poem 57. We're still in Qiyan gushi section. This is by Zeng Zhang. A song of running horse river in farewell to General Feng of the Western expedition. Look how swift to the snowy sea races running horse river, and sand up from the desert flies yellow into heaven. This 9th month night is blowing cold at Wheel Tower, and valleys like peck measures fill with the broken boulders that downward headlong follow the wind. In spite of grey grasses, Tartar horses are plump. West of the hill of gold, smoke and dust gather. O general of the Chinese troops, start your campaign. Keep your iron armor on all night long. Send your soldiers forward with a clattering of weapons, while the sharp wind's point cuts the face like a knife, and snowy sweat steams on the horses' backs, freezing a pattern of 5 flower coins. Your challenge from camp, from an inkstand of ice, has chilled the barbarian chieftain's heart. You will have no more need of an actual battle. We await the news of victory here at the Western Pass. This might be a reference to the Anlushan Rebellion that is also in the background of the Changhenge poem that we've already read in this class. This occurred, of course, in the Tang Dynasty when the Turkic armies from the west invaded the Tang Dynasty and defeated it for a while, and there was havoc and massive casualties throughout China, throughout the empire. Poem 58. We're still in the same section, Qiyan gushi. This is also by Zeng Zhang. A song of Wheel Tower in farewell to General Feng of the Western expedition. A break to take a sip of coffee. On Wheel Tower parapets, night bugles are blowing. Though the flag at the northern end hangs limp, scouts in the darkness are passing Li, where west of the hill of gold the Tartar chieftain has halted. We can see from the lookout the dust and black smoke where Chinese troops are camping north of Wheel Tower. Our flags now beckon the general farther west. With bugles in the dawn he rouses his grand army. Drums like a tempest pound on 4 sides, and the Ying mountains shake with the shouts of 10,000. Clouds and the war wind whirl up in a point over fields where grass roots will tighten around white bones. In the Dagger River mist, through a biting wind, horseshoes at the sand mouth line break on icy boulders. Our general endures every pain, every hardship, commanded to settle the dust along the border. We have read in the green books tales of old days, but here we behold a living man, mightier than the dead. So this is another sort of sub-theme or major theme of the collection, these sort of tributes to the generals who are fighting on the western frontier. Next poem is, we're still in the Qiyan gushi section, is also by Chen Zhang. This is a song of white snow in farewell to field clerk Wu going home. Another militant or military song, military gushi old style poem. The north wind rolls the white grasses and breaks them. And the 8th-month snow across the Tartar sky is like a spring gale come up in the night, blowing open the petals of 10,000 pear trees. It enters the pearl blinds. It wets the silk curtains. A fur coat feels cold, a cotton mat flimsy. Bows become rigid, can hardly be drawn, and the metal of armor congeals on the men. The sand sea deepens with fathomless ice, and darkness masses its endless clouds. But we drink to our guest bound home from camp, and play him barbarian lutes, guitars, harps, till at dusk, when the drifts are crushing our tents and our frozen red flags cannot flutter in the wind, we watch him through Wheel Tower Gate going eastward, into the snow mounds of Heaven Peak Road, and then he disappears at the turn of the pass, leaving behind him only hoof prints. Poem 60, we're still in the same section. This next one is by Du Fu. It's a rather long Qiyan gushi. Du Fu. A drawing of a horse by General Cao at Secretary Wei Feng's house is the title. Throughout this dynasty, no one had painted horses like the master spirit, Prince Jiangdu. And then to General Cao, through his 30 years of fame, the world's gaze turned for royal steeds. He painted the late emperor's luminous white horse. For 10 days the thunder flew over Dragon Lake, and a pink agate plate was sent him from the palace. The talk of the court ladies, the marvel of all eyes, the general danced, receiving it in his honored home. After this rare gift followed rapidly fine silks from many of the nobles, requesting that his art lend a new luster to their screens. First came the curly-maned horse of Emperor Taizong, then for the guos, a lion-spotted horse. But now in this painting I see 2 horses, a sobering sight for whosoever knew them. They are war horses. Either could face 10,000. They make the white silk stretch away into the vast desert. And the 7 others with them are almost as noble. Mist and snow are moving across a cold sky. Are almost as noble. Mist and snow are moving across a cold sky, and hoofs are cleaving snow drifts under great trees. With here a group of officers, and there a group of servants. See how these 9 horses all vie with one another, the high clear glance, the deep firm breath. Who understands distinction? Who really cares for art? You, Wei Feng, have followed Cao. Ji Dong preceded him. I remember when the late emperor came toward his summer palace. The procession in green feathered rows swept from the eastern sky. 30,000 horses, prancing, galloping, fashioned every one of them like the horses in this picture. But now the imperial ghost receives secret jade from the river god. For the emperor hunts crocodiles no longer by the streams. Where you see his great gold tomb, you may hear among the pines and bird grieving in the wind that the emperor's horses are gone. Alright, getting through this is going to require some serious coffee, so I'm going to drink this as I recite. Poem 61. We're still in the Qiyan gushi section. Next poem is also by Du Fu. Qiyan gushi. So these are all heptasyllabic lines with 7 characters in each line. Dufu, a song of a painting to General Cao. O general, descended from Wei's Emperor Wu, you are nobler now than when a noble. Conquerors and their velour perish. But masters of beauty live forever. Velour. With your brushwork learned from Lady Wei, and second only to Wang Xi's, faithful to your art, you know no age, letting wealth and fame drift by like clouds. In the years of Kai Yuan, you were much with the emperor, accompanied him often to the court of the south wind. When the spirit left great statesmen on walls of the hall of fame, the point of your brush preserved their living faces. You crowned all the premiers with coronets of office. You fitted all commanders with arrows at their girdles. You made the founders of this dynasty, with every hair alive, seem to be just back from the fierceness of battle. The late emperor had a horse known as Jade Flower, whom artists had copied in various poses. They led him one day to the red marble stairs, with his eyes toward the palace in the deepening air. Then, General, commanded to proceed with your work, you centered all your being on a piece of silk. And later, when your dragon horse, born of the sky, had banished earthly horses for 10,000 generations, there was one jade flower standing on the dais, and another by the steps, and they marveled at each other. The emperor rewarded you with smiles and with gifts, while officers and men of the stud hung about and stared. Han Gang, your follower, has likewise grown proficient at representing horses in all their attitudes, but picturing the flesh, he fails to draw the bone, so that even the finest are deprived of their spirit. You, beyond the mere skill, used your art divinely, and expressed not only horses, but the life of a good man. Yet here you are, wandering in the world of disorder, and sketching from time to time some petty passer-by. Please note your case with the whites of their eyes. There's nobody pure, there's nobody poor. Read in the records from earliest times how hard it is to be a great artist. Poem 62, also a qiyan gushi, also by Dufu. This is a slightly shorter one, but about the same length. A letter to Censor Han. I am sad. My thoughts are in Yaozhou. I would hurry there, but I am sick in bed. Beauty would be facing me across the autumn waters. Oh, to wash my feet in Lake Dongting and see its 8 corners. Wild geese flying high, sun and moon both white, green maples changing to red in the frosty sky, angels bound for the capital of heaven near the North Star, riding, some of them phoenixes and others unicorns, with banners of hibiscus and with melodies of mist, their shadows dancing upside down in the southern rivers, till the queen of the stars, drowsy with her nectar, would forget the winged men on either side of her. From the wizard of the red pine this word has come for me, that after his earlier follower he has now a new disciple who formerly at the capital as Emperor Liu's advisor, in spite of great successes, never could be happy. What are a country's rise and fall? Can fleshpots be as fragrant as mountain fruit? I grieve that he is lost far away in the south. May the star of long life accord him its blessing. O purity, to seize you from beyond the autumn waters, and to place you as an offering in the court of imperial jade. Poem 63 now. Okay, we're going to read to the end of this section, and then the next section is the second yuefu section, at which point we will stop the video, and I'll continue the recitation in another video. This is going to take too long. much longer than I expected. Next poem, same section, dufu again. A Song of an Old Cypress. Beside the temple of the great premier stands an ancient cypress with a trunk of green bronze and a root of stone. The girth of its white bark would be the reach of 40 men, and its tip of kingfish blue is 2,000 feet in heaven. Dating from the days of a great ruler's great statesman, their very tree is loved now and honored by the people. Clouds come to it from far away, from the Wu cliffs, and the cold moon glistens on its peak of snow. East of the Silk Pavilion yesterday I found the ancient ruler and wise statesman both worshipped in one temple, whose tree with curious branches ages the whole landscape in spite of the fresh colors of the windows and the doors. And so firm is the deep root, so established underground, that its lone lofty boughs can dare the weight of winds. Its only protection the heavenly power, its only endurance the art of its creator. Though oxen sway 10,000 heads, they cannot move a mountain. When beams are required to restore a great house, though a tree writes no memorial, yet people understand that not unless they fell it can use be made of it. Its bitter heart may be tenanted now by black and white ants, but its odorous leaves were once the nest of phoenixes and pheasants. Let wise and hopeful men harbor no complaint. The greater the timber, the tougher it is to use. Timber. Poem 64, also a qiyan gushi, also by Du Fu, and this one includes a short preface. A Song of Dagger Dancing to a Girl Pupil of Lady Gongsun is the title, and here's the preface. On the 19th of the 10th month in the second year of Dali, I saw in the house of the Kuifu official Yuan Ci a girl named Li from Lingying dancing with a dagger. I admired her skill and asked who was her teacher. She named Lady Gongsun. I remembered that in the third year of Kai Yuan at Yangqiang, when I was a little boy, I saw Lady Gongsun dance. She was the only one in the Imperial Theater who could dance with this weapon. Now she is aged and unknown, and even her pupil has passed the heyday of beauty. I wrote this poem to express my wistfulness. The work of Tang Shi of the Wu district, that great master of grassy writing, was improved by his having been present when Lady Gongsun danced in the Ye district. Grassy writing, sousho in Japanese, is like a cursive style of script, sousho. From this may be judged the art of Gongsun. And here's the poem. There lived years ago the beautiful Gongsun, who, dancing with her dagger, drew from all four quarters an audience like mountains lost among themselves. Heaven and earth moved back and forth, following her motions, which were bright as when the archer shot the 9 suns down the sky, and rapid as angels before the wings of dragons. She began like a thunderbolt, venting its anger, and ending like the shining calm of rivers and the sea. But vanished are those red lips and those pearly sleeves, and none but this one pupil bears the perfume of her fame, this beauty from Lingying and the town of the white god, dancing still and singing in the old blithe way. And while we reply to each other's questions, we sigh together, saddened by changes that have come. There were 8,000 ladies in the late emperor's court, but none could dance the dagger dance like Lady Gongsun. 50 years have passed, like the turning of a palm. Wind and dust filling the world obscure the imperial house. Instead of the pear garden players, these are the same pear garden players that we saw in the Changhanga by Bai Juyi, the Song of Everlasting Sorrows. The pear garden players in Japan or in Chinese is Li something yuan, I forget the word. Instead of the pear garden players who are blown by like a mist, There are 1 or 2 girl musicians now trying to charm the cold Sung. There are man-sized trees by the emperor's golden tomb. I seem to hear dead grasses rattling on the cliffs of Chu Tang. The song is done. The slow string and quick pipe have ceased. At the heart of joy, sorrow comes with the eastern moon rising, and I, a poor man, not knowing where to go, must harden my feet on the lone hills toward sickness and despair. Poem 65. We're still in the qiyan gushi section. We have several more of this and then we'll stop the video. Next poem is by Yuan Jie. The poem is titled A Drinking Song at Stonefish Lake. And there's a preface here too. I have used grain from the public fields for distilling wine. After my office hours, I have the wine loaded on a boat, and then I seat my friends on the bank of the lake. The little wine boats come to each of us and supply us with wine. We seem to be drinking on in islet in Lake Dongting, and I write this poem. Stonefish Lake is like Lake Dongting. When the top of Zung is green and the summer tide is rising, with the mountain for a table and the lake a fount of wine, the tipplers all are settled along the sandy shore. Though a stiff wind for days has roughened the water, wine boats constantly arrive. I have a long-necked gourd, and happy on Ba Island, I am pouring a drink in every direction, doing away with care. Poem 66. Also, we're still in the same section of qiyan gushi, and this is by Han Yu. Title is Mountain Stones. Rough were the mountain stones, and the path very narrow. And when I reached the temple, bats were in the dusk. I climbed to the hall, sat on the steps, and drank the rain-washed air. Among the round gardenia pods and huge banana leaves. On the old wall, said the priest, were Buddhas finely painted. And he brought a light and showed me, and I called them wonderful. He spread the bed, dusted the mats, and made my supper ready. And though the food was coarse, it satisfied my hunger. At midnight, while I lay there, not hearing even an insect, the mountain moon with her pure light entered my door. At dawn I left the mountain and alone lost my way. I in and out, up and down, while a heavy mist made brook and mountain green and purple, brightening even everything. I am passing sometimes pines and oaks, which 10 men could not girdle. I am treading pebbles barefoot in swift running water. Its ripples purify my ear, while a soft wind blows my garments. These are the things which in themselves make life happy. Why should we be hemmed about and hampered with people? O chosen pupils, far behind me in my own country, what if I spent my old age here and never went back home? Poem 67. We're still in the same section of the qiyan gushi, and this poem too is by Han Yu. On the festival of the moon to sub-official Jiang. The fine clouds have opened and the river of stars is gone. A clear wind blows across the sky and the moon widens its wave. The sand is smooth, the water still, no sound and no shadow, as I offer you a cup of wine asking you to sing. But so sad is this song of yours, and so bitter your voice, that before I finish listening, my tears have become a rain. Where Lake Dongting is, joined to the sky by the lofty 9-Doubt mountain, dragons, crocodiles rise and sink, apes, flying foxes whimper. At a 10-to-1 risk of death, I have reached my official post, where lonely I live and hushed, as though I were in hiding. I leave my bed, afraid of snakes. I eat, fearing poisons. The air of the lake is putrid, breathing its evil odors. Yesterday, by the district office, the great drum was announcing the crowning of an emperor, a change in the realm. The edict granting pardons runs 300 miles a day. All those who were to die have had their sentences commuted. The unseated are promoted and exiles are recalled. Corruptions are abolished. Clean officers appointed. My superior sent my name in, but the governor would not listen, and has only transferred me to this barbaric place. My rank is very low, and useless to refer to. They might punish me in lashes in the dust of the street. They might punish me with lashes in the dust of the street. Most of my fellow exiles are now returning home, a journey which to me is a heaven beyond climbing, end quote. Stop your song, I beg you, and listen to mine, a song that is utterly different from yours. Quote, tonight is the loveliest moon of the year. All else is with fate, not ours to control. But refusing this wine, may we choose more tomorrow? Poem 68. We're in the same section. This one is also by Han Yu. Stopping at a temple on Heng Mountain, I inscribe this poem in the gate tower. The 5 holy mountains have made the rank of the 3 dukes. The other 4 make a ring, with the Song Mountain midmost. Song Mountain midmost. To this one, in the fire-ruled south, where evil signs are rife, heaven gave divine power, ordaining it appear. All the clouds and hazes are hidden in its girdle, and its forehead is beholden only by a few. I came here in autumn during the rainy season, when the sky was overcast and the clear wind gone. I quieted my mind and prayed, hoping for an answer, for assuredly righteous thinking reaches to high heaven. And soon all the mountain peaks were showing me their faces. I looked up at a pinnacle that had held the clean blue sky. The wide purple canopy joined the celestial column. The stone granary leapt, while the fire god stood still. Moved by this token, I dismounted to offer thanks. A long path of pine and cypress led to the temple. Its white walls of purple pillars shone, and the vivid color of gods and devils filled the palace with patterns of red and blue. I climbed the steps and, bending down to sacrifice, besought that my pure heart might be welcome in spite of my humble offering. The old priest professed to know the judgment of the god. He was polite and reverent, making many bows. He handed me divinity cups. He showed me how to use them and told me that my fortune was the very best of all. Though exiled to a barbarous land, mine is a happy life. Plain food and plain clothes are all I ever wanted. To be prince, duke, premier, general was never my desire, and if the god would bless me, what better could he grant than this? At night I lie down to sleep in the top of a high tower. While moon and stars glimmer through the darkness of the clouds, apes call, a bell sounds, and ready for dawn I see arise. Far in the east, the cold, bright sun. Okay, so that's an exile poem. There are several, maybe a dozen or so exile-themed poems in this collection. That was one of them. Poem 69. We're still in the qiyan gushi section. This next one is also by Han Yu. A poem on the stone drums. Chang handed me this tracing from the stone drums, beseeching me to write a poem on the stone drums. Du Fu has gone. Li Bai is dead. What can my poor talent do for the stone drums? When the Zhou power waned and China was bubbling, Emperor Xuan, up in wrath, waved his holy spear and opened his great audience, receiving all the tributes of kings and lords who came to him with a tune of clanging weapons. They held a hunt in Qiyan and proved their marksmanship. Fallen birds and animals were strewn 3,000 miles, and the exploit was recorded to inform new generations. Cut out of jutting cliffs, these drums made of stone on which poets and artisans, all of the first order, had indited and chiseled, were set in the deep mountains to be washed by rain, baked by sun, burned by wildfire, hied by evil spirits, and protected by the gods. Where can he have found the tracing on this paper? True to the original, not altered by a hair, the meaning deep, the phrases cryptic, difficult to read, and the style of the characters neither square nor tadpole. Time has not yet vanquished the beauty of these letters, looking like sharp daggers that pierce live crocodiles, like phoenix mates dancing, like angels hovering down, like trees of jade and coral with interlocking branches, like golden cord and iron chained tied together tight, like incense tripods flung in the sea, like dragons mounting heaven. Historians, gathering ancient poems, forgot to gather these, to make the two books of musical song more colorful and striking. Confucius journeyed in the west, but not to the Qin kingdom. He chose our planet and our stars, but missed the sun and moon. I, who am fond of antiquity, was born too late, and thinking of these wondrous things cannot hold back my tears. I remember when I was awarded my highest degree during the first year of Yuan Ho, how a friend of mine, then at the Western camp, offered to assist me in removing these old relics. I bathed and changed, then made my plea to the college president and urged on him the rareness of these most precious things. They could be wrapped in rugs, be packed and sent in boxes and carried on only a few camels, 10 stone drums to grace the imperial temple like the incense pot of Gao, or their luster and their value would increase 100-fold if the monarch would present them to the university, where students could study them and doubtless decipher them, and multitudes attracted to the capital of culture from all corners of the empire would be quick to gather. We could scour the moss, pick out the dirt, restore the original surface, and lodge them in a fitting and secure place forever, covered by a massive building with wild eaves, where nothing more might happen to them as it had before. But government officials grow fixed in their ways and never will initiate beyond old precedent. So herd boys strike the drums for fire, cows polish horns on them, with no one to handle them reverentially. Still aging and decaying, soon they may be effaced. 6 years I have sighed for them, chanting toward the west, the familiar script of Wang Xi, beautiful though it was, Wang Xi, by the way, is a great calligrapher. The familiar script of Wang Qizhi, beautiful though it was, could be had several pages just for a few white geese. But now, 8 dynasties after the Zhou, and all the wars over, why should there be nobody caring for these drums? The empire is at peace, the government free, poets again are honored and Confucians and mentions. Oh, how may this petition be carried to the throne? It needs indeed an eloquent flow like a cataract. But alas, my voice has broken in my song of the stone drums to a sound of supplication choked with its own tears. Okay, there are 4 or 5 more of this section, and we'll enter the second yuefu section. So let me finish up this section, and then we'll stop the video, and I'll make a continuation next video in the series. All right, poem choked with its own tears. Poem 70. We're still in Qiyan gushi section. Poem 70 by Liu Yuan, an old fisherman. An old fisherman spent the night here under the western cliff. He dipped up water from the pure qiyan and made a bamboo fire. And then at sunrise he went his way through the cloven mist, with only the creak of his paddle left in the greenness of mountain and river. I turn and see the waves moving as from heaven, and clouds above the cliffs coming idly one by one. Poem 71. Now we have the very, very famous Changhan by Bai Juyi, which we've already read in this class, but I'm going to read it again here. I think this might be this is the same translation that we've used. This is a very long example of the of the qiyan gushi. I think it's the longest qiyan gushi in this collection of 306 poems or whatever. I'm going to read this poem now in full. It's fairly long. Bai Juyi, 唱行歌, a song of unending sorrow. And this, of course, is the story of Yang Guifei, who is this legend of Yang Guifei and the emperor and their doomed love. It came to form the basis of much of Japanese culture, Japanese literature, and so forth. Continuing into the present, we still see this story of their love repeated even in modern literature. All right. Bai Juyi, a song of unending sorrow. China's emperor, it's also the subject of numerous no plays and so forth. And of Genji Monogatari, of course, first chapter Genji Monogatari begins with a reference to this story, and there are similarities in between the two stories. Song of Unending Sorrow. China's emperor, craving beauty that might shake an empire, was on the throne for many years, searching, never finding, till a little child of the Yang clan, hardly even grown, bred in an inner chamber with no one knowing her, but with graces granted by heaven and not to be concealed, at last one day was chosen for the imperial household. If she but turned her head and smiled, there were cast 100 spells, and the powder and paint of the 6 palaces faded into nothing. It was early spring. They bathed her in the flower-pure pool, which warmed and smoothed the creamy-tinted crystal of her skin. And because of her languor, a maid was lifting her when first the emperor noticed her and chose her for his bride. The cloud of her hair, the petal of her cheek, gold ripples of her crown when she moved, were sheltered on spring evenings by warm hibiscus curtains. But nights of spring were short, and the sun arose too soon, and the emperor from that time forth forsook his early hearings, and lavished all his time on her with feasts and revelry, his mistress of the spring, his despot of the night. There were other ladies in his court, 3,000 of rare beauty, but his favors to 3,000 were concentred in one body. By the time she was dressed in her golden chamber, it would be almost evening, and when tables were cleared in the tower of jade, she would loiter, slow with wine. Her sisters and her brothers all were given titles, and because she so illumined and glorified her clan, she brought to every father, every mother through the empire, happiness when a girl was born rather than a boy. High rose Li Palace, entering blue clouds, and far and wide the breezes carried magical notes of soft song and slow dance, of string and bamboo music. The emperor's eyes could never gaze on her enough, till war drums, booming from Yuyan, shocked the whole earth and broke the tunes of the rainbow skirt and the feathered coat. The forbidden city, the 9-tiered palace, loomed in the dust from thousands of horses and chariots headed southwest. The imperial flag opened the way, now moving and now pausing, but 30 miles from the capital beyond the western gate, the men of the army stopped. Not one of them would stir till under their horses' hoofs they might trample those moth eyebrows. Flowery hairpins fell to the ground. No one picked them up. And a green and white jade hair tassel and a yellow gold hair bird. The emperor could not save her. He could only cover his face. And later, when he turned to look, the place of blood and tears was hidden in the yellow dust blown by a cold wind. At the cleft of the Dagger Tower trail, they crisscrossed through a cloud line under Omei Mountain. The last few came. Flags and banners lost their color in the fading sunlight. But as the waters of Shu are always green and its mountains always blue, so changeless was His Majesty's love and deeper than the days. He stared at the desolate moon from his temporary palace. He heard bell notes in the evening rain cutting at his breast. And when heaven and earth resumed their round and the dragon car faced home, the emperor clung to the spot and would not turn away from the soil along the Ma Wei slope under which was buried that memory. that anguish. Where was her jade-white face? Rulers and lords, when eyes would meet, wept under their coats as they rode, with loose rein, slowly eastward, back to the capital. The pools, the gardens, the palace, all were just as before. The lake Tai hibiscus, the Wei palace willows, but a petal was like her face, and a willow leaf her eyebrow. And what could he do but cry whenever he looked at them? Peach trees and plum trees blossomed in the winds of spring. Lacca foliage fell to the ground after autumn rains. The western and southern palaces were littered with late grasses, and the steps were mounded with red leaves that no one swept away. Her pear garden players became white-haired, and the eunuch's thin eyebrows in her court of pepper trees. Over the throne flew fireflies, while he brooded in the twilight. He would lengthen the lamp wick to its end, and still could never sleep. Bell and drum would slowly toll the dragging night hours, and the river of stars grow sharp in the sky just before dawn. And the porcelain mandarin ducks on the roof grow thick with morning frost, and his covers of kingfisher blue feel lonelier and colder with the distance between life and death year after year, and yet no beloved spirit ever visited his dreams. At Lingqiang lived a Taoist priest who was a guest of heaven, able to summon spirits by his concentrated mind. And people were so moved by the emperor's constant brooding that they besought the Taoist priest to see if he could find her. He opened his way in space and clove the ether like lightning, up to heaven, under the earth, looking everywhere. Above he searched the green void, below the yellow spring, but he failed, in either place, to find the one he looked for. And then he heard accounts of an enchanted isle at sea, a part of the intangible and incorporeal world, with pavilions and fine towers in the five-colored air, and of exquisite immortals moving to and fro, and of one among them, whom they called the ever-true, with a face of snow and flowers resembling hers he sought. So he went to the west hall's gate of gold and knocked at the jasper door and asked a girl, called Morsel of Jade, to tell the doubly perfect. And the lady, at news of an envoy from the Emperor of China, was startled out of dreams in her nine-flowered canopy. She pushed aside her pillow, dressed, shook away sleep, and opened the pearly shade and then the silver screen. Her cloudy hair dress hung on one side because of her great haste, and her flowery cap was loose when she came along the terrace, while a light wind filled her cloak and fluttered with her motion as though she danced the rainbow skirt and the feathered coat. And the teardrops drifting down her sad white face were like a rain in spring on the blossom of a pear. But love glowed deep within her eyes when she bade him thank her liege, whose form and voice had been strange to her ever since their parting. Since happiness had ended at the court of the bright sun, and moons and dawns had become long in Fairy Mountain Palace. But when she turned her face and looked down toward the earth and tried to see the capital, there were only fog and dust. So she took out, with emotion, the pledges he had given, and through his envoy sent him back a shell box and gold hairpin, but kept one branch of the hairpin and one side of the box, breaking the gold of the hairpin, breaking the shell of the box. Our souls belong together, she said, like this gold and this shell. Somewhere, sometime, on earth or in heaven, we shall surely. And she sent him by his messenger a sentence reminding him of vows which had been known only to their two hearts. Quote, "On the 7th day of the 7th month, in the palace of long life, we told each other secretly in the quiet midnight world that we wished to fly in heaven, two birds with the wings of one. and to grow together on the earth 2 branches of one tree." End quote. Earth endures, heaven endures, sometime both shall end, while this unending sorrow goes on and on forever. That was by Bai Juyi, probably the most famous poem in this collection. The next poem, poem 72, is also by Bai Juyi, and this is also another fairly long qiyan gushi called the Song of a Guitar. In the 10th year of yuefu, I was banished and demoted to be assistant official in jian. This is the preface to the poem. In the summer of the next year, I was seeing a friend Li Bai and heard in the midnight from a neighboring boat a guitar played in the manner of the capital. Upon inquiry, I found that the player had formerly been a dancing girl there, and in her maturity had been married to a merchant. I invited her to my boat to have her play for us. She told me her story, heyday, and then unhappiness. Since my departure from the capital, I had not felt sad, but that night after I left her, I began to realize my banishment. Again, another poem about banishment, about exile. And I wrote this long poem, 612 characters, right? All right. And then the poem begins. I was bidding a guest farewell at night on the Shengyang River, where maple leaves and full-grown rushes rustled in the autumn. I, the host, had dismounted, my guest had boarded his boat, and we raised our cups and wished to drink, but alas, there was no music. For all we had drunk, we felt no joy, and were parting from each other. When the river widened mysteriously toward the full moon, we had heard a sudden sound, a guitar across the water. Host forgot to turn back home, and guest to go his way. We followed where the melody led, and asked the player's name. The sound broke off. Then reluctantly she answered. We moved our boat near hers, invited her to join us, summoned more wine and lanterns to recommence our banquet. Yet we called and urged 1,000 times before she started toward us, still hiding half her face from us behind her guitar. She turned the tuning pegs and tested several strings. We could feel what she was feeling even before she played, each string a meditation, each note a deep thought, as if she were telling us the ache of her own life. She knitted her brows, flexed her fingers, then began her music, little by little letting her heart share everything with ours. She brushed the strings, twisted them slow, swept them, plucked them, first the air of the rainbow skirt, then 6 little ones. The large strings hummed like rain, the small strings whispered like a secret, hummed, whispered, and then were intermingled like a pouring of large and small pearls into a plate of jade. We heard an oriole, liquid, hidden among flowers. We heard a brook bitterly sob along a bank of sand. By the checking of its cold touch, the very string seemed broken as though it could not pass, and the notes dying away into a depth of sorrow and concealment of lament, told even more in silence than they had told in sound. A silver vase abruptly broke with a gush of water, and out leapt armored horses and weapons that clashed and smote, and before she laid her pick down, she ended with one stroke, and all 4 strings made one sound, and as of rending silk there was quiet in the east boat and quiet in the west, and we saw the white autumnal moon enter the river's heart. When she had slowly placed the pick back among the strings, she rose and smoothed her clothing, and formal, courteous, told us how she had spent her girlhood at the capital, living in her parents' house under the Mount of Toads, and had mastered the guitar at the age of 13, with her name recorded first in the class roll of musicians, her art the admiration even of experts, her beauty the envy of all the leading dancers, how noble use of Wu Ling, had lavishly competed, and numberless red rolls of silk been given for one song, and silver combs with shell inlay been snapped by her rhythms, and skirts the color of blood been spoiled with stains of wine. Season after season, joy had followed joy. Autumn moons and spring winds had passed without her heeding, till first her brother left for the war, and then her aunt died, and evenings went and evenings came, and her beauty faded. With ever fewer chariots and horses at her door, so that finally she gave herself as wife to a merchant, who, prizing money first, careless how he left her, had gone a month before to Fuliang to buy tea, and she had been tending an empty boat at the river's mouth, no company but the bright moon and the cold water, and sometimes in the deep of night she would dream of her triumphs, and be wakened from her dreams by the scalding of her tears. Her very first guitar note had started me sighing. Now, having heard her story, I was sadder still. We are both unhappy, to the sky's end. We meet, we understand. What does acquaintance matter? I came a year ago away from the capital, and am now a sick exile here in Jiujiang. And so remote is Jiujiang that I have heard no music, neither string nor bamboo, for a whole year. My quarters near the river town are low and damp, with bitter reeds and yellowed rushes all about the house. And what is to be heard here morning and evening? The bleeding cry of cuckoos, the whimpering of apes. On flowery spring mornings and moonlit autumn nights I have often taken wine and drunk it all alone. Of course there are the mountain songs and the village pipes, but they are crude and strident and grate on my ears. And tonight when I heard you playing your guitar, I felt as if my hearing were bright with fairy music. Do not leave us. Come, sit down, play for us again, and I will write a long song concerning a guitar. End quote. From the poet persona. Moved by what I said, she stood there for a moment, then sat again to her strings, and they sounded even sadder, although the tunes were different from those she had played before. The feasters, all listening, covered their faces, but who of them all was crying the most? This Jiaojiang official. My blue sleeve was wet. Okay, 3 more to go. Next is poem 73. This is, again, we're in the same section, namely the qiyan gushi section. We're almost finished with that section. And here's another fairly long poem, this time by Li Bai. The poem is called The Han Monument. The Son of Heaven in Yuan times was martial as a god, and might be likened only to the Emperors Xuan and Xi. He took an oath to reassert the glory of the empire, and tribute was brought to his palace from all 4 quarters. Western Huai for 50 years had been a bandit country. Wolves becoming lynxes, lynxes becoming bears, they assailed the mountains and rivers rising from the plains with their long spears and sharp lances aimed at the sun. But the emperor was a wise premier by the name of Du, who guarded by spirits against assassination, hung at his girdle the seal of state, and accepted chief command, while these savage winds were harrying the flags of the ruler of heaven. Generals Suo, Wu, Gu, and Tong became his pawns and claws. Civil and military experts brought their writing brushes, and his recording advisor was wise and resolute. 140,000 soldiers, fighting like lions and tigers, captured the bandit chieftains for the imperial temple. So complete a victory was a supreme event, and the emperor said, "To you, Du, should go the highest honor, and your secretary, Yu, should write a record of it." When Yu had bowed his head, he leapt and danced, saying, "Historical writings on stone and metal are my especial art." And since I know the finest brushwork of the old masters, my duty in this instance is more than merely official, and I should be at fault if I modestly declined." The emperor, on hearing this, nodded many times, and Yu, retired and fasted and in a narrow workroom, his great brush thick with ink as with drops of rain, chose characters like those in the canons of Yao and Xung, and a style as in the ancient poems Qing, Miao, and Sheng Ming. And soon the description was ready on a sheet of paper. In the morning he laid it with a bow on the purple stairs. He memorized the throne. "I, unworthy, have dared to record this exploit for a monument." The tablet was 30 feet high, the characters large as dippers. It was set on a sacred tortoise, its columns flanked with raguns. The phrases were strange, with deep words that few could understand, and jealousy entered and malice and reached the emperor, so that a rope 100 feet long pulled the tablet down, and coarse sand and small stones ground away its face. But literature endures like the universal spirit, and its breath becomes a part of the vitals of all men. The Tang plate, the Confucian tripod, are eternal things, not because of their form, but because of their inscriptions. Sagacious is our sovereign, and wise his minister, and high their successes, and prosperous their reign. But unless it be recorded by a writing such as this, how many they hope to rival the 3 and 5 good rulers? I wish I could write 10,000 copies to read 10,000 times, till spittle ran from my lips and calluses hardened my fingers, and still could hand them down through 72 generations as cornerstones for rooms of great deeds on the sacred mountain. Okay, from poem 74 onward, we are now in the yuefu section, so in the next video I will continue from 74 onward and hopefully read all of the remaining poems. That's all for now. I will stop the video at this 2-hour mark. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, send me an email, and be sure to watch video 1 before you watch this video. Goodbye.